This is the time of year when you take things away, not add.
Curiosity often discovers some of the best creative ideas.
Honestly, life's too short to not be focusing on the things that light you up.
Lift the facade off, get to know the real person, and then you make the real connections.
Take those breaks because you can't pour from an empty cup.
Welcome back to Social Media for Business, the podcast for business owners who want social media to actually do something for their business. I am Rebecca Bridgen, your host, and this is episode 5, season 2. So our theme this month is the mid-year reset. I cannot believe that we're here already, and this year has been insane. But here we are, mid-year already, and I cannot think of a better guest to explore this with. So today's guest is Banu, and she is the founder of Uncommon Conferences. She's a global practice that designs and facilitates uncommon conferences or unconferences and workshops for the maritime, energy, infrastructure and health sectors. And I have personally attended some, and they are very different to events that I have been to before, but in the most positive ways that I have gained so much more out of them as the result of the way that she has delivered them. There are no PowerPoints, there's no panel discussions or fireside chats. It's really carefully designed with a deeply human conversations involved that are producing real outcomes. So Banu's not only special for that, she has more than 20 years of international experience and is a former global marketing GM at Wärtsilä. She's been a journalist and also an executive MBA graduate from Columbia Business School and London Business School. So she's very accomplished. So what I'm especially excited about today is the conversation about events and social media, because Banu uses social platforms in ways that most businesses have not even thought of. And I think it's going to open a lot of eyes. So Banu, welcome. I'm really, really glad you're here today.
Thanks, Bex. That was such a glowing intro. This is going to be hard to live up to. I'm like, I did do those things, didn't I? It's funny, right? Until someone says it back to you, you just forget, you just carry on, plod on.
So I'm going to really pick your brains today then. So you've had one of the most genuinely international careers, as we've just said, in maritime specifically. If you had to describe a thread that runs through it all, what would it be?
Yeah, I'm going to pick on something that you said in the intro around how deeply human you thought your experience of an Uncommon Conference was. And I do think that is the thread that ties it all together for me. I've always been incredibly curious about the world around me, the people around me, what makes people tick, what causes us to be our best selves and bring our best selves to work and life. And, from being a journalist, obviously, asking questions, being curious about people, being curious about their stories, and not just on a surface level, but on a much deeper level, is something that, of course, brings forth the best pieces of journalism. And I guess, I really fell into marketing, but I do think, having that global perspective. I was born in Singapore. I'm ethnically South Indian. I halfway grew up in Australia, halfway grew up in Shanghai. All of those things just made me a really, I guess, useful bridge in that Wärtsilä marketing world, because I started out as GM of the APAC region across the entire portfolio of products, and it really helped me connect with each and every office in their own unique ways. Like one day I'm talking to Japan, the next day I'm talking to India, the next day I'm flying to Kuala Lumpur, and on and on. And so the thing that united all of these experiences was that it was people. I needed to get to know the people at the heart of those offices and help them market their services and products to their market in the most relatable way possible. And I guess, to present day Uncommon Conferences, that still holds true. Being able to kind of lightly step in all of those worlds, but still maintain that sort of neutral perspective is, I think, the common thread, people. And it's a good thing that I love people and I love being amongst people. And COVID really helped to translate that joy into an online space as well. I do wish we were doing more online. I think the world kind of went too far the other way when we could meet in person again. And I feel like we're not really leveraging that online space as much as we could be. That's something I'm quietly working on changing.
Oh, well, that's exciting. I can't wait to find out more about that. You also said something about curiosity, that you're genuinely curious as a journalist. And for me, and I've definitely found this in your events, but also when you actually take the time and you are curious and you ask questions rather than talking at people and you listen, curiosity often discovers some of the best creative ideas. I mean, some of the ideas that we've spoken about, they couldn't have just come from me sat solo. And then you talked about, I mean, it's not unique to maritime, but it is specifically very much maritime, that whole cross-cultural people aspect is very relationship driven, but fundamentally at the heart of it, it's the people, it's the human element that I think is the driver. And I love that you said COVID made a change, because actually that was a really nice curveball into the whole theme of pivoting. I also pivoted in COVID. That's when Innovate Social sort of started to rear its ugly head, was as a result of COVID.
Its gorgeous head.
Yeah. I know so many maritime businesses that came off the back of COVID, and they're doing remarkably well. So yes, it was diabolical, but it was great for us to be able to sit down and have the headspace to be creative and go, you know what, I'm going to look at this online, and and they're all very digital businesses as well. So you did pivot because you went from, Vartzilla and everything. So I wanted to ask you, where was it? What was it? How did you come to choose a less certain path? And how did you come to make that decision and be brave?
I guess there was a couple of turning points in there, but you mentioned the executive MBA that I did. It was a global program. I was exposed to a lot of incredible people, both in New York and in London, and being in that entrepreneurial space, being in the space where most people had been in corporate jobs and were looking to pivot into being entrepreneurs, starting their own business. It's kind of in the water, so you couldn't get away from it. And, every module, every elective that you did, there was some kind of spin on becoming a business owner. And so that was kind of reason number one. I was surrounded by the motivation to start my own business. And then reason number two was, again, our good friend COVID, because I found myself trapped, quote unquote, trapped back in Perth. And it just became obvious that I wasn't going to be able to get back to Shanghai anytime soon, which is where my job with Vartzilla was. And so it became, I guess, just right timing. And yeah, took the plunge. And I was very lucky because I had a lot of keen supporters at Vartzilla who believed in what I was doing. And I guess, funny enough, I should say that Uncommon Conferences kind of really had its start at Vartzilla when we designed and delivered Gas Fest, as it used to be known.
Yes.
Yeah. All the people, all the partners that knew me as the kind of, I guess, mastermind of Gas Fest were very happy to follow me as I broke away from Vartzilla and set up Uncommon Conferences, which became then the vehicle for SMF Fest, as we now know it and that you've been to, when we transitioned and pivoted from just LNG as a marine fuel into all sustainable marine fuels. So I guess, long story short, it was a bit of right time, right place, a bit of luck, and just taking the plunge and saying, okay, if not now, then when?
Yes. But you were also listening because, like you said, that curiosity, you're absorbing information that's coming towards you that actually helps make those decisions. So hearing things and keeping your ears to the ground and knowing when to pivot, especially in the marketing space, because obviously we're focused on the social media marketing here, but even in just the marketing space, how do you know what's noise and how do you know what's worth listening to?
I think trusting your own professional judgment is severely underutilized in our industry and in our space. You've got to trust your professional judgment. You have to trust that the work, that you've done the work, that you can identify the good stuff from the average stuff. And also then reaching out to people you trust, being like, hey, look, I've come across this. What do you think? We don't lean on our collaborative partners as often as we should be. And, because we are in a global business, everyone's kind of trapped in their own home offices. We forget that there's people out there that we can and should be leaning on.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why, SMF Fest and Uncommon Conferences is really good, because it gives you that opportunity to, in a very concentrated way, just absorb other people's opinions, thoughts, expertise, that sort of thing. And it's just really great place to bounce those ideas that you've had and help form them and develop them into something that's got a bit more meat on the bones, shall we say. So I'm going to go back to mid-year resets. We know that every business owner will get to a point, and normally by this point, the plans that they've made in January quite often look a little bit optimistic, or they're not quite where they were planning to go, because, we're always exposed to curveballs and different things that you couldn't possibly forecast. So what does a genuine mid-year reset actually look like for a small to medium-sized business, especially regarding their comms, because you do absorb trends and new pieces of information that get you excited and things like that. So I wanted to get your ideas on how you handle that.
Yeah. Oh my. Yeah. I mean, you couldn't be closer to the truth. And also in Australia, our tax year runs July to June, if you know what I mean. So for us, the mid-year reset actually is the start of the new financial year as well.
Good timing.
So I do spend a lot of time around this time of year thinking about, okay, what next? Even though I will say from a planning point of view, I do work to the calendar year, but it is a good time for a reset. I'll say two things. The first thing is probably it's going to be less popular, and the second thing hopefully is a bit more useful and relatable. The first thing is I tend to go with the flow a lot, maybe more than I should, but that's just how I am. And I think it's important to say that out loud because we are inundated with advice in the professional world about how to be and what to do and the 10-step plan and the 10-step year and all of these really rigid structures that honestly speaking don't work for me. I know that from experience. I know that from, having worked around the world in various different capacities for over 20 years. That's not who I am. And it's taken me a long time to accept that and to not see it as a failing on my part, right? So I tend to move more like the water down the river, in and amongst the rocks, in and amongst the stones and the riverbeds and the winding bits, because it just means I can be the best that I am and bring my best self to my work and to my clients, right? And not get too caught up on, I said I was going to do these things and I haven't, so I'm going to beat myself up instead. Yeah. That just doesn't work for me.
It's a complete waste of energy, isn't it?
Absolutely. So then the second thing I will say is I do find this is a good time to put everything on the table and look at it and say, hang on a second. And some things I've had on my list for over a year. And if I haven't acted on it yet, whether that's part of the comms plan or whether it's part of a social media plan or whatever, it might have seemed like I'm a huge, by the way, side note, I'm a huge user of my notes app. So I'm constantly jotting things down and constantly emailing things to myself, which in the moment seems like such a great idea. And then I'll look back on it a couple of weeks later and be like, oh, that's really silly. I don't think anyone's going to be interested in that. So I find that this is a good time of year to look at all of that with fresh eyes. You've got to block out all the distractions, like turn off all the background apps, turn off your emails, your WhatsApp, your LinkedIn or whatever, and just focus on these endless notes that you've made, these endless emails that you've sent to yourself and say, okay, now it's time to chuck some of this out because you're probably not going to use it. And that makes you immediately feel a bit emotionally lighter, mentally lighter, because you're dealing with a much smaller to-do list that's probably more impactful and useful. So those are the two things I'll say.
So you design spaces where people can have the conversations, and they're conversations that people have often been feeling maybe uncomfortable with or they've been avoiding. But actually what you managed to do is create a really safe space that people feel supported and respected to be able to express themselves in a respectful way and share these ideas so that actually you get all the good, the bad and the ugly in the mix to come out with a thing that is actually very usable. So I think personally that's pretty special. So in a marketing context, what is the conversation most business owners are potentially avoiding at mid-year that's maybe holding them back?
I think, going back to your previous question around what does that mid-year reset look like? The conversation that people are probably not having is the one about being more brutal, about culling things. This is the time of year when you take things away, not add, because you're running out of runway, you're running out of bandwidth, you're running out of energy. It's just the honest truth. There's 24 hours in the day and there's 365 days in the year. And I don't even know how many of those are working days. But again, of course, for small business owners, there are no Sundays. Just being a little bit brutal with your plan in an effort to be kinder to yourself is what I would strongly suggest. And maybe, you made me think about the parking it in a pie in the sky box. I think that's a good idea. If you really feel strongly about something, you don't want to get rid of it, it'll break your heart to do it, then create a system, create a folder where that idea can go to live in, but it isn't in front of you, mocking you every day. And you can send it to a place where, okay, I'll come back to this when I have time. I'll be honest, I have one of those folders and I cannot tell you the last time I actually had the time to go and look at it. I know. Which is its own kind of special hell, but never mind.
It's like something that you put in the loft. You're never going to see it again, but you just can't bear to part with it. Yeah, you're right. And the reducing, not adding element is very key, because actually you get all these additional ideas and then you want to do them and you just can't do them. Being brutal and stripping down is really good, because you could take some time to really think about the key themes that are really working for you where you really want to push your business, where the biggest return on investment has been showing for you this half of the year, and go, okay, well, actually, we're getting more profit from X. So let's actually double down on that rather than getting more messages of more different things. Let's double down on that one message to then really see how far we can push it. And somebody said this to me the other day, and I've heard it before, and I totally agree. And it was, when you're reflecting on trying to improve your weaknesses, but actually, I would rather improve my strengths because that's my strengths. And I would pay somebody else to do my weaknesses because I'm never going to get amazing at the weaknesses. And is it a waste of my time to be focusing on? Yes, of course, trying to develop yourself and yada, yada, yada. But actually, if you could put the energy that it's almost like sort of frittering it down a drain hole to the weaknesses. And it's kind of the same thing, isn't it?
And you're not being enthused or excited by doing it or trying to get better at it because it's just not, it's not congruent with who you are as a person and what lights you up. And honestly, life's too short to not be focusing on the things that light you up.
It's really hard to accept that something didn't work. So how do you let go of that? How emotionally can you do it?
Look, crack open a bottle of wine, put something really fly out. Or whatever your usual methodology is of giving yourself a bit of time and a bit of grace to mourn that thing and then just move on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a conversation with Sam in the office the other day. We were talking about when you have to let something go. And she said, you sort of move through it quite smoothly, Bex. And I said, well, I've learned something now. And I said, I wouldn't say it's smooth, but I allow the emotions. I give an evening or whatever, and I allow myself to feel the emotions, and I will sit with them quietly and watch the sunset or something. But recognize
Go
them
for a big walk.
Let them flow through me, and by the next day I've sort of felt like I've worked through it. So I suppose it's, as a business owner, you get a lot of those, don't you? And you have to kind of process those. I know that you guys use social media in a nice way. And one of the ways I definitely love the way you use the group, because it really fits really well for the type of event that you have. And you use WhatsApp as well, of course, as part of the experience itself. And it's not a promotional tool for you. So you're using it as a way to communicate with and liaise with the people who are going to come to your conferences. So can you explain what you actually do, why it works? Have you got a system in place of how you make it work?
You would have gotten from this conversation so far that I am a very organic sort of person. It's that go with the flow vibe. And I tend not to force things too much because I've learned that works best with uncommon conferences and with what people have come to realize and appreciate and acknowledge about the experience and about working with me personally. And so I guess I keep my finger on the pulse on what's happening in the industry that I know will be interesting for the community. And by the way, the group that you mentioned is comprised exclusively of people who have ever been at a fest, whether that's an in-person or online experience. We've been going since 2017. Like I said, I think we're up to the 7th or 8th in-person edition, and we had countless online workshops during the pandemic. So it is a very exclusive group intentionally. I get requests to join all the time, but I have to turn them away and say, I'm sorry, unless you've been at a fest, we can't let you into this group. Because as you said much earlier in this conversation, I'm really big on creating safe spaces where people can feel seen and heard and where they don't have to explain themselves because they know that everyone else in this group is going to get it, right? Because they were there. They were part of that shared experience. And so instead of seeing it as a way to, as you say, do anything promotional, which I really don't, I see it as a place to share information that I've spotted from other parts of LinkedIn. And then, of course, also sometimes I use it as a space to do a temperature check, do a sense check. It's like, okay, hey, what's going on, with you guys at the moment? Okay, we've just finished MEPC 84. How are we feeling? Should we jump on an online session to hear from our sharpshooters, as we call them? Loads of people are posting on LinkedIn from having been at the IMO. And that's great, but I do think people aren't able to be completely candid with what went on behind the scenes. And I can appreciate that, right? A lot of these people are representing huge organizations. They have, I guess, formalities in place that prevent them from sharing too candidly, or they're worried about the impact it's going to have on their professional reputation, et cetera, et cetera. And so what I think would be useful for our community, the SMF community, is to be able to hear from people in real time in that really no holds barred kind of way. We won't record the session. We won't send it around afterwards. So if you want to know what's going on, you've got to join in real time. And of course, you can share what someone has said. You can share the knowledge that you've learned, but you can't attribute it to anyone. So again, coming back to that safe space.
That human element, I think, well, that builds trust, and trust is so key when you're building your social comms, because that's how people get to know you before the event even. I wanted to ask you about your process for people who are coming to SMF Fest, let's use that as an example, for the first time. And you do a few things actually to help build the awareness, because obviously you want bums on seats as well. And that's part of the business plan. So it's how you also use the socials to gain that visibility. Then what you do during the fest to gain visibility, but then afterwards, what does it look like for you? And is there anything special that you do or work on to continue the conversation, like you're saying, keeping them warm, keeping the touch points, checking in? So basically, I'm asking for a brand new person coming in, how do they know about it, the before, during, and after?
Again, what I've found useful when thinking about my comms plan and thinking about, introducing the event and the concept to new people is always staying true to the DNA of the event and the experience. Like, I want them to know from the very beginning that you're stepping into something different, right? And we want to welcome you into that something different, but you should also be forewarned about it, because no one wants to be unpleasantly surprised when they get somewhere. You would have noticed that I put out a lot of communication about what you should wear, what you shouldn't wear, what time you should show up, what you should have for breakfast the day you show up, and things like that. So those things, whilst being informative, are also, they're clues, they're social cues and clues as to what it's going to be like. And I think that feeds then very nicely into what people want and don't want to share about their experience when they're there. And of course, last year we had this fabulous introduction from you and from Innovate on, how you can show up at an event and from an event, instead of the usual selfie brigade that people tend to trot out and being like, oh, it was so great to see so and so and so and so, and we had a wonderful time at the event. It's like, well, sure, but what does that really tell anyone about the event, what the experience was about? So I think people notice that attention to detail that we are big on ahead of the event. And if you go through and look at the posts that people share after the event, or even from when they're there, it's not your typical, I'm at a shipping conference, here are a bunch of pictures of me. They share some really tangible takeaways. It's really heartfelt, and it's just warm and fuzzies. It's brilliant. And you know what? That makes it stand out on the timeline. Like when we're drowning in AI slop and the same old, that sort of post really stands out. And I'm sure you would have noticed some of the people that we know in common who aren't big posters, they had like incredible reactions to their SMF posts because it was so genuine and so organic.
I definitely think when you attend an event and you actually provide some really insightful takeaways from what was learnt, because LinkedIn is about knowledge sharing, and I think we always need to remember that. And it's not Facebook, it's but there are elements of Facebook in it, and I think we need to acknowledge that, because we are human beings and we do respond to elements like that. The key takeaways are always, and actually I love personally reading those, because I'm like, I couldn't go to that event, but I would really like to know what was said or what was learned or what was what was hot, basically. So actually sharing that, like you said, and everybody does seem to do that from SMFS, because, well, I mean, it's hard not to, because it's just packed full of insanely informative conversations. So you can't get away with going there and not putting a post up like that afterwards. So that's definitely works together in that way.
Absolutely. And look, I think one of the fundamental values of the fest is to have fun, because we don't have enough fun in work settings, which just goes against the human psyche and how we learn best and connect best and show up best, right? So I think that sense of fun and that sense of being able to bring your whole self to the event and the experience is something that people are surprised by, and then find that, oh, actually posting about this is really simple because I was my authentic self while I was there and I was having fun, and you want to share when you're having fun.
Yeah. And the people who've been at the event, of course, especially events like yours where everybody's had an opportunity to talk to everybody else. It's not like you're sat in a sort of faceless auditorium where you will never get the opportunity to speak to anybody else there. You're just going to listen to a panel discussion. You have spoken to everybody else, and that naturally weaves its way into the socials post-event because everybody's enthusiastic to comment on everybody else's posts. Yeah. And that leads into the whole brand advocacy conversation that we are finding at the moment. We've been inundated in the last month or so with big marketing teams talking about brand advocacy and recognizing that they need to get their teams engaged and involved on LinkedIn for the benefit of the brand. It's about people, and actually you need them as amplifiers. So actually doing what you've done has done just that. So I wanted to ask from a small business owner that's not running an events company like yours, because, and I always say this, events and social media just pair well beautifully, like cheese and wine.
Like red wine and cheese.
Yeah.
That's too
I was
funny.
also thinking about pears and walnuts. I mean, I don't know if you know about this, but they pair really well together. But they do really pair really nicely together. For a business owner who doesn't have a large events company, but they've maybe got a team meeting or a client dinner or a webinar or a workshop, how can they apply that same thinking that you sort of really beautifully nurtured for Uncommon Conferences and turn these smaller gatherings into some meaningful social media content that actually tells a story and it builds the feeling and the sense of the brand and the people behind it and who they work? What advice would you give to them?
I think the first thing and the first mistake that people make is that they pretend to be somebody else on the socials. They feel like there's the work self and then there's the personal self. And then every now and again, there's, the identity that crosses over into both areas. And number one, just be yourself. Like, post something that you'd be interested in reading. Don't post a thing that you've just seen yesterday that made you cringe because you feel like there's no other way to be, or I have to do this because X, Y, and Z, because there is some invisible, unpublished rule book about how to show up on LinkedIn. So I think that authenticity piece, I know it's so overused, but it's incredible in 2026 how you still see people clearly not being themselves and not being true to themselves. So that's the first thing I'll say. The second thing is be specific. The more specific and targeted you can be, say one good thing really well instead of trying to summarize the whole thing with like 10 different bullet points, because that can carry so much more weight and have so much more impact on readers. So that's the second thing I'll say. And then the third thing I'll say is if you can share a really genuine interaction that you had with even just one other person at this XYZ, whether it was a client event or a webinar or whatever, a team meeting, one genuine interaction with someone else. These are the things that AI can't do for you. These are the things that's going to help you stand out on the socials from all of the other generic, bland, vanilla stuff. I know people, who go to really successful, well-established industry events, but what they say about those events, they could say about any event. Like, there is zero specificity.
And often, when we have conversations one-to-one in real time, we say so much about different events because they each have a different flavor, don't they? But yet that's never communicated in the socials when they're talking about the event that they've attended. And it's really funny. And I think you're right. You've got to be human, because especially now in AI, we each have a flavor. It's getting very food orientated here, Banu. I can see it. But we do, and we are all different, and we shouldn't be afraid to be ourselves. And yes, some people will not like that. And that's okay, because actually it means that the people who do like it are true and they're real, rather than, hiding the real self and then having a load of vanilla connections that may or may not do business with you or like you or want to work with you or whatever. I'd rather have the sort of lift the facade off, get to know the real person, and then you make the real connections. And in terms of interacting with one another in terms of the brand advocacy, I think it really shows the sign of a good culture of a place of work if the office culture, if it's a positive one, obviously, is moved online. So the colleagues who've enjoyed speaking with each other in the office, who have respect for what each other does. I mean, that's the ideal office situation. I know it's not every office situation, but they respect each other. They can bring it online and they can actually engage with each other naturally and enjoy each other in the digital space as well as the physical space. And I think that goes for brand advocacy, no end. But like you said, it's got to be human. It's got to be real. It's got to be authentic. Do one thing really well. I loved that piece of advice because it's so true. So true. You run your own business, you work globally, as we know, and you think deeply about strategy and connection. So what does your own mid-year reset look like for Uncommon Conferences this year? What are you reflecting on? Because you said you had some things in the bag. So is there anything that you can sort of give a little hint away, or and how are you approaching it?
This is funny, but I'm going on a physical reset and a retreat.
Goodness. Wow. I love that.
Yes. Yeah. People who've known me for a while know that I go to this place in Thailand, in Phuket, called Amity Wellness. And look, I understand I'm really lucky to be able to do this, but whatever form that takes for you, to be able to take yourself out of the day-to-day of the work and the business and the planning and the agonizing and the plans and the social media, getting a little bit of time and distance away from it all. So, I spend 10 days. It's the yoga, it's the meditation, it's the, the fasting program, it's the detox, all of those things. And I just find that when I come back from that, I'm able to look at the list with so much more clarity and so much more, I guess, excitement, because that is the thing that starts to waver a little bit this time of year. And especially for Uncommon Conferences, we are very bottom heavy on how busy we are. So that sort of September to November period is generally when everything happens at the same time. It's really important to kind of fill up your tank and find the joy, even if, the enthusiasm might be wavering, you're starting to get a little bit tired. So find the joy again and try to, that specificity that we talked about earlier, try to really hone in on the things that, are going well and continue to do them well. If you find yourself being overwhelmed, then take those breaks, because you can't pour from an empty cup, as they say, and there's only one you. So that's my slightly philosophical take on the mid-year reset.
I love it. And actually, you need a mental and a physical break, because you can be so exhausted that you just can't discern the noise from actually some really great ideas. So if you're really struggling to identify them, then maybe it is time that you take a break, get some quiet in your life for a week, and then the ideas will flow. I always find that. So Banu, where can people find you? Please let us know.
I'm on LinkedIn. So Banu Kannu is my personal handle. Uncommon Conferences also has a company page spelt exactly as it sounds. Yeah, that's probably the best place to get me. I'm pretty active. And like I mentioned, SMF Fest has a closed LinkedIn group. So if you have been to one of our events and you're not in the group yet, drop me a note and I will be more than happy to add you.
And of course, also, if you haven't been to SMF Fest, why the hell not? Get yourself signed up and reach out to Banu and tell her that's because you heard the Social Media for Business podcast and you really want to sign up. It is, from personal experience, a brilliant event. Do wear flat shoes, be prepared to be exhausted, but you'll come out with some really meaningful new connections, especially around the sustainability environmental conversation in Maritime. So anybody involved in fuels and alternative fuels and things like bunkering, ports and harbours, that sort of thing, it's for you. So that was Banu Kannu, founder of Uncommon Conferences, and you will find her at uncommonconferences.com as well, and on LinkedIn, of course. The thing that has stayed with me from this conversation is the idea that your events and social media are not two separate things. You can manage them, but you need to have that human element. Don't be afraid to pivot a little bit or reduce down rather than increasing up, because by this point, you've probably got a lot of noise going on in the mid-year to do a reset. Definitely go on holiday if you can. I'm going to take that one away. I really want to do that one myself. If today's episode was useful, please do share it with business owners, definitely who's in the middle of a reset right now, because they might find something really useful from it. And of course, please don't forget to like and subscribe to the Social Media for Business podcast. I've been Rebecca Bridgen. We'll hopefully see you again in episode 6. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.